Welcome to another Flex Wheelers podcast. Today, we have a collaboration with the Insurance Man podcast. I'm joined by my hosts, LaQuentin Jenkins and Greg Nagaye, and we're bringing you an important conversation about diabetics with our special guest, nurse practitioner William Patton. William, could you just give us I know you did offline, but could you give us again just a 30,000 foot view on what you've been doing?
So like we talked about, kind of my background was been kind of ground level medicine my entire career. I actually started off in the Army National Guard back in '07, joined up as a medic, ended up being attached to the 221st Cav out of Las Vegas, say to my guys, and served as an infantry medic there for 4 years, and then transitioned to a training battalion, served as another 2 as an instructor. After that, I ended up back east where I went through firefighter school, kind of still pursuing that public service lifestyle. Ended up transitioning up here to Athens, Georgia. And then I worked EMS, non-emergent transport, and I actually started working in a lot of the settings and a lot of facilities that I had started my public service EMS career and I would actually finish in. So I worked medical transport for about 4 or 5 years, put myself through nursing school, ended up graduating from there in 2015. Then I transitioned into nursing into the critical care environment. I worked in a couple med surg ICUs and pulmonary ICUs from the period of 2015 to about 2021, right around there. During that time, like we were talking about, we worked pretty much day one to day end through COVID. Alpha, Delta waves, everything we could think of, we managed during that time, just like everybody else did. Last 2 years of that, I put myself through nurse practitioner school, ended up getting my acute care nurse practitioner. And after transitioning from the critical care field, I transitioned into the skilled nursing facility field, where we continue running their internal medicine program today.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible, man. So, again, thank you for your unrepairable service to our country, but not only that, just to the day-to-day individuals. I mean, you seem like you need something to do. You seem like a horse that needs a purpose, man.
I think if you ask my wife, she told me the same thing. I'm always busy.
Awesome.
Great.
I'm a novice, and I always get these things confused. I know I'm a national insurance broker, and we deal with a lot of things associated with diabetes. I mean, from the extremes of them telling me I'm pre-diabetic to their multiple forms of insulin, the pill. I mean, it's just there's a lot going on in that space. But I always get confused. What is the difference between type 1 and type 2?
So type 1 and type 2, and like I told you off screen, I'll preface this with saying I am the farthest thing from an endocrinologist you will ever see. But we know enough to take care of folks. We know enough to do some good when we need to. Type 1 has a couple different names. Some people refer to it as insulin-dependent diabetes, in the sense of you become completely insulin-dependent. So type 1 is typically, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to be associated with some kind of autoimmune process that's attacked the beta cells in the pancreas, and it's pretty much destroyed your body's ability to produce endogenous insulin. Our pancreas' ability to produce our own. And in those settings, you become completely dependent on exogenous insulin. Those are your chronic insulin pumps. Those are the people that absolutely have to have insulin. They may have other means of trying to control their blood sugar, but they're insulin dependent. Type 2 is the one that is the vast majority. I think the last numbers, according to the American Diabetic Association, about 37 million folks in the United States alone have type 2 diabetes, or diabetes in general. Type 2 is the one that's the vast majority. That's the one where you start to look at your metformins, you start to look at your SGLT2s, your GLP-1 agonists, as far as kind of managing those highs and lows along with the insulins. So the biggest difference is, one is absolutely insulin dependent. You're gonna need it no matter what. Type 2 is something that a lot of people can make a whole lot of headway and sometimes almost outright cure with lifestyle changes, mitigating diets as best as possible, and kind of controlling the overall picture.
So just to be clear, 1, I have to stick myself The other, I can take a pill.
Oh, no. You still might have to stick yourself. But you're going to have to. Two, you might be able to mitigate that a little bit.
I got it.
So just going a little bit more specifically on that one, we know type 1s, which I have a niece who she's on an insulin pump. That's a non-negotiable for her at this point. Type 2, what are the typical treatments there or mitigating things that we could do to control that? I have a few family members that are type 2 diabetics. Mm-hmm. What is a typical treatment process for those types?
So for type 2, you want to treat the symptoms of it. You want to treat the high blood sugar, you want to treat the disease process, but we also very much so need to look at the underlying factor. A lot of times, one of the precipitating factors that you can look at when you're determining whether or not either someone is already type 2 and doesn't know it or has a high chance of becoming type 2 is that they start to develop something called metabolic syndrome. And what that is there's a lot of information about the actual diagnostic criteria, but I think some of them are multiple fasting blood glucose levels of over 200, I believe. And then I believe in men, waist circumference of 40 inches or greater, and then an elevated triglyceride levels, all those would indicate that you have something called metabolic syndrome. And that is an indicator or a high chance prognostic indicator that you either have or will develop diabetes in the future. And as far as the type 2 treatments go, a lot of times we trend a level called hemoglobin A1C. That's kind of what we check as the baseline. That's kind of the gold standard of where's your diabetes at now. Now, it's not something that is like checking your blood sugar where you check it every single day. This is a end goal, long-term coverage. This is something that your NP or your physician will check, at your 3-month checkup just to see, okay, I started you on, this medication for this much, for this long. Let's see where we're at. And that's where they look at, okay, if your hemoglobin A1C went down, or conversely, if it ended up still going up, we know that either one, something's working good, keep it up, or two, something's up, we need to try another approach. And just like type 1, type 2 can very successfully make use of your fast-acting insulins, your short-acting insulins, and then your long-terms like your basal insulins that can help kind of control those long-term blood glucose levels and help mobilize that insulin to actually get that sugar where it needs to go so it doesn't sit there and circulate in the bloodstream, which is going to cause the long-term issues.
Wow. You know what, William? So for somebody who's brand new to this subject, what is diabetes?
So diabetes, you have two people fighting in diabetes. You have insulin, you have blood sugar. Both of them play a very important role, and both of them need to be used accordingly. So in diabetes, there's a problem with, what's a good way to break it down? There's a problem with the transmission system. So what insulin does is help mobilize the blood sugar that is in our bloodstream and get it where it needs to go. Obviously, brain, muscle tissue, if you're out training, you're going to need sugar in your muscles to work. If you're working, like you're all putting me to work today, I'm going to need sugar in my brain to think. Insulin's job is to mobilize that blood, the blood sugar that's flowing around in our circulatory system, in our blood, to push it in the tissue where it goes. The problem that occurs is either in type 1 or type 2, you have a problem with that delivery system. So instead of the blood glucose, the blood sugar, actually getting to the tissues where it needs to go, you start to see an elevated amount just kind of circulating around, kind of just hanging out, doing its own thing. And that's where it really becomes a problem, because the issue becomes is since it's not getting into the tissues and it's just kind of hanging out in the bloodstream, then you start to worry about that glucose kind of lobbing onto areas like your kidneys, like your leading to chronic kidney disease, like your veins and your arteries that can lead to peripheral vascular disease, and so on and so forth. So that's the biggest thing. You got insulin, blood sugar. There's a problem with getting the sugar where it needs to go. So then it just kind of stays in the bloodstream. And that's what we have to fix.
So one way, if your mind can get you to lean forward just a little bit so we have a little bit of connection. You're giving great information. And for me, I'm just trying to go back to food.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to understand, okay, so is it the food that we're eating that's causing this, I don't know, lack of a better way to put it, causing too much insulin to be released, requiring to work too hard, and it pushes out too much and it is not absorbed or it doesn't do its job? What is actually happening cause that the issue? Is it the food, or what's causing the issue with the insulin?
Phenomenal question. It's not just the food. The food is definitely a factor. Let's say if you eat an 18-ounce steak or a cake, we'll put those two together. To process all the sugar that is in that cake, you're going to need a whole lot more insulin than you're going to need to process the proteins that are in that steak. So if you are a diabetic, either type 1 or type 2, you're going to need a whole lot of insulin backup in order to process that amount of cake. Now, that's a very, very kind of 30,000-foot view of how food can affect it. It's certainly not the only thing that does. But if you think of a wave beating up against a rock, and then you can compare that to pushing your pancreas and pushing your body to have to tolerate more and more insulin release, especially like, let's say if you're not necessarily controlling your diet the best you can. Lots of highly processed food, highly processed sugars, a lot of high fats, basically what everybody loves nowadays. You think of that and you're really putting the miles on your pancreas and its ability to produce that insulin. And then you can develop something called an insulin resistance, where the insulin's there, but your body's having a really tough time mobilizing it and getting it to do its job to get that sugar where it needs to go. So, and that kind of falls under the type 2. Type 1 is insulin dependent, and type 2 is kind of an acquired insulin resistance. It's doing its job, but not quite enough. We got to figure out what we can do to help it.
Got it.
And so taking that into account, looking at a few different people, types of the two different types, there are a few very well-known type 1 diabetics that are elite level athletes, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking Olympian Gary Hall Jr., Mark Andrews, Jay Cutler, the football Jay Cutler, sorry, Flex, Chris Dudley, Brandon Morrow. In their cases, just maintaining their insulin levels exogenously, that's pretty much what they need to do. That's just not even, again, just to stay alive at this point, right?
Yep.
But for the average person, I mean, you're not going to find too many elite level athletes that are type 2 diabetics, I'm assuming, just based off of the basics that we know about it. Not often anyway, but active people, or is it going to be more sedentary people? And then what are we looking at as far as lifestyle factors?
The sedentary lifestyle is definitely going to play a role. Is it possible that someone could be very, very fit, very, very active and still develop it? 100%. That kind of leads into, one of the things that I've tried to advocate most about diabetes is I definitely feel like it has, or it can develop somewhat of a negative stigma when it comes to how it develops. It's never just one thing. It's never, hey, you ate like crap, you sat on the couch, now you have diabetes. It's never just that. Don't get me wrong. A sedentary lifestyle, a poor dietary regimen that's high in processed sugars, high in processed foods, those are definitely going to be contributing factors. But you also look at age, race, gender. I think I said age already. All those things play a huge factor of it. Genetics also plays a huge factor. Some guys, unfortunately, they just draw the short straw. So it's definitely one of those things that you can certainly see someone at the higher level be a type 2 diabetic. But because type 2 diabetes is more reliant on contributing factors to develop type 2 diabetes, if you're living a very, very active lifestyle and you're an elite level athlete, chances are you're not going to fall into those trapments or those contributing factors that lead to that development. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So can you walk us through what happens in the body, what actually happens in the body when somebody's a diabetic?
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So like I was saying, what's actually happening in the body is you're eating just like you're supposed to, doing everything you're supposed to, and the blood sugars levels rise in your blood, like they all do anytime we eat. Now, in a normal intact pancreas, somebody that's non-diabetic, the pancreas, the beta cells are going to release enough insulin to push those sugars that are now in your blood from eating to the tissues where they need to go, and that's going to drop your blood glucose, your blood sugar levels. Now, in diabetes, either whether type 1 or type 2, what happens is you eat just like everyone else does, your blood sugar rises, but your pancreas either completely doesn't have beta cells, type 1, or has beta cells, but has developed an insulin resistance, type 2. So now they don't have those delivery mechanisms to push that blood glucose into the tissues. So instead of actually getting the energy and getting all the tissue or Instead of the tissue getting the blood sugar it needs, it just stays in the bloodstream. And that's what I was saying earlier. That's where you start to see some end organ dysfunction, problems with the kidneys, problems with your vasculature, like your arteries and your veins, and so on and so forth. It just doesn't get where it needs to go is the biggest problem.
You know, when we talk about high blood pressure, they talk about the way your body may feel in terms of being lightheaded and things of that nature. Is there a certain feeling that one can begin to experience as indicating that they are what they use called pre-diabetic? And for those who can be pre anything, if they issue you a medication, as far as insurance is concerned, you are that. You're right. You are that. So there's no such thing as a pre. They give you medication, you are. So is there anything that's going on in the body that that causes a certain feeling to say that, hey, you may be
like a warning sign?
Yeah, warning sign that you may be a diabetic. Because one of the issues we have in many of the minority communities is that don't go to the doctor. You know, I was at a symposium a few years ago, and it said that 80% of the African American men walking around on Earth have high blood pressure, and he said probably the other 20% just don't
haven't gotten diagnosed.
They want to admit it. So, you know, is there something that I should be aware of, maybe feeling in my body, to indicate I might have be a diabetic?
Phenomenal question. So for diabetes, there's kind of a golden rule that we use, especially in the outpatient setting where you're not like getting blood work done every day like you do in the hospital. You look for the 3 P's. You look for polyphagia, polydipsia, and polyuria. Okay, the first one is
I'm in the 5th grade. I'm in the 5th grade.
So polydipsia. I'm drinking too much. I'm trying to think of a palatable way to display the pathophys behind polydipsia. Long story short, when your blood sugar rises for a long time, glucose in the bloodstream is a very, very large molecule, kind of like a protein. Now, wherever those molecules go, they create a gradient. With a gradient flows water. Just like creating a gradient downhill, water is going to flow with it. What will happen is after a long time of actually having elevated blood glucose, because just like you're saying, you're just kind of doing your own thing, you don't even realize it yet. What can happen is it can cause a little damage to the kidneys and cause it to leak some protein and to leak some glucose in your urine. And like I was just saying, wherever that glucose is going, water is going to follow. And a lot of folks will find themselves urinating all the time. So
that's very interesting, because being, you know, I've dealt with every kind of condition you can relate to. I've had to deal with in the insurance, because at the end of the day, the doctors can't do you any good if you can't pay for it, right? And one of the things I often have heard, and you mentioned that, is too much protein in the, I think you said in the kidney, or too much protein in the urine.
Protein leaking into the
urine.
Yep.
So I've heard this mentioned many times before. So what test is being done to determine that? And is that an issue, saying it is a kidney issue in conjunction with it being a diabetic issue, or the diabetic issue causing the kidney issue?
Good question. Like, what came first, chicken or egg? It can be, for sure. So elevated blood glucose levels, just like elevated blood pressure levels, can absolutely affect the kidneys. Typically, you'll see one of those occur and actually cause the kidney damage. The good news is, more times than not, as long as it's still relatively early and your kidneys haven't suffered a massive insult or anything like that, it is pretty reversible. So what they look for is, like I was saying, the polyuria, the peeing all the time. Since you're urinating all the time, you're actually increasing your thirst drive because you're dehydrating yourself from the elevated blood glucose levels. Then you're drinking all the time. So now you're drinking all the time, you're urinating all the time. And one of the funny thing is, you know, I think a lot of people, whenever we think diabetic, especially type 2, you think sedentary lifestyle, relatively overweight, just generalized speaking. But one of the ways and one of the warning signs, especially earlier on in life, like men under 30 usually, is unexplained weight loss, but you're hungry all the time. That doesn't make any sense. That's one of the 3rd P's. It's called polyphagia, hungry all the time. And what is happening is because the blood glucose is staying in the bloodstream and is not being mobilized to the muscle tissue, to your brain, your body is actually having to break down muscle tissue and fats in order to use those through a method of ketosis, just like we do whenever you talk about like ketoacidosis or guys on the keto diet. Your body just isn't able to use the glucose because it's stuck there in the arteries and the veins in your circulatory system. So your body's actually breaking down tissue to use for energy and leaving you in a catabolic state, and that's what's making you hungry. Go ahead, LaQuentin.
So basically you're saying, you know, being a diabetic actually makes you fatter because it's breaking down the muscle, which is going to have an overall impact on your ability to just function. It's making you physically weaker, and your body fat, your BMI is going up. Did I understand that correctly?
Theoretically. Now, usually the weight loss is one of the early signs that we see. That's like like we talked about, the red flag. The polyphagia, eating all the time, polydipsia, drinking all the time, polyuria, peeing all the time. And then you associate that with, hey, I'm doing all this, but I'm still losing weight. One of the first things I would look at, or the first thing your primary care would look at, is we need to check some labs and check and see what your blood sugar is looking like. Because what you're saying is absolutely correct. If you break down the muscle tissue over a long period of time, correspondingly, your BMI will increase just because your weight is going to go down, but your adipose tissue theoretically won't. Now, your body's still going to be breaking out adipose tissue because and that's the craziest thing about it, even though you have an elevated blood sugar in your circulatory system, your body's not able to utilize it because your body needs the insulin to push that sugar into the tissues where it needs to go to utilize it. Now, if you have an insulin resistance, or if you're type 1 and don't have it, that's when you start to worry about elevated sugar in the veins and arteries. Instead of being in the tissue where we need it, your body becomes catabolic and breaks itself down to burn that energy that you need just to keep on going. That's when what you'll see, what you're talking about, where you see that corresponding weight loss, but your blood sugar is going up. So it's counterintuitive.
Let me jump on that a little bit because a couple things piqued my interest as you're saying all that. I'm looking at kind of the smaller, bigger picture because I know there's some issues. I mean, you brought up things hanging around in your arteries. So are we talking atherosclerosis type of issues? And then what are some other complications outside of the cardiorespiratory system that can happen? Because you hear people with type 2 diabetes always, you hear about the horror stories about vision issues and then even loss of limb issues because of extremities not getting the circulation. So can you go over some of those? I like hitting people in the face with, this is, you don't do it just to be healthier and live longer. If you don't take care of this, you can have some serious issues. I usually take that route. So what can I hit people over the head with?
You remember how they used to call hypertension the silent killer? And sometimes they still do because it does so much damage over a long period of time and you don't even realize it. Diabetes is the same way. If you have an artery running to a part of your body, if you have uncontrolled diabetes for an extended period of time, it can be susceptible to breakdown from exactly what you're saying. And if you're alive and your fingers and everything, toes and all working, they're getting blood flow, which means they're getting blood flow with high sugar in it. Anywhere that has an artery is subjected to arteriosclerosis, just like you said. Now, like what you were saying, when we think of arteriosclerosis in the cardiovascular system, you think of coronary artery disease, pulmonary artery disease in the pulmonary system. I can't think of, anyway, sorry, I lost track. Peripheral arterial disease, peripheral vascular disease, hands and feet, anywhere that has an artery, if your blood sugar is elevated, it can start to deposit in plaques just like it can with like elevated lipids, high LDL cholesterol. Anywhere that has an artery is susceptible to damage. So that means diabetic nephropathy, diabetic kidney problems.
So that's what it is.
You got it.
That's causing that nerve.
Now, and again, to preface this, farthest thing from an endocrinologist you will ever find. But that is the kind of the 30,000 foot view. Even Dr. Hardy will be able to explain it a whole lot more intuitive than I will. But the long story short of it is, it's a problem with elevated blood glucose in the bloodstream. Bloodstream has to go everywhere. So if it's touching that blood, it could potentially have an issue, which is why it can lead to so many issues. That's why it can be the leading cause of peripheral vascular disease, diabetic nephropathy, like we talked about, diabetic uropathy, problems with your eyes, just about everything you can think of.
So does it work with high blood pressure to create? Is that a part of what's participating in creating strokes?
They can be, absolutely. And when you think about, and like I said, it's not just if you have diabetes, if you have hypertension, if you have hyperlipidemia, you're going to have a stroke. You know, it's never that simple. But those are all contributing factors. If I see somebody come in with those three, one of the first things I'm going to look at is, okay, what are we doing to make sure you don't have one? Especially when it comes to stuff like diabetes, hypercholesterol, what you look at is arteriosclerosis, just like Mr. Greg was referring, you know, or stenosis of the arteries and the veins where they get kind of tough. They don't have the elasticity that they used to. And then as plaque can start to build up from elevated lipids, from highly processed foods, elevated blood sugars over a long period of time, it narrows down that amount of room that you have in those arteries, makes it a whole lot easier to clot off. And then you got a problem. That's where you get your strokes, heart attacks, so on and so forth.
So it sounds like there's a number of different ways that you can have this problem, you know, through eating, through just your genetic background, all that. What are some of the common medications that's prescribed for being a diabetic?
So probably the most common is insulin, and it's not the first line for type 2. Usually type 2 is you'll look at like your metformins. They're pretty tried and true, pretty safe. Usually we see a relatively good response to this, especially if you catch it early on. But insulin is one that you're going to see in any and all types of diabetics, no matter what it is, 1, 1.5, 2, whatever you can see, you're going to see insulin. Because if we remember, diabetes inherently is an issue with that insulin or insulin sensitivity. Either you don't have it or you don't have enough of it. So you'll see a lot of like you're referencing. I think you said niece with an insulin pump. Is that right?
That was me. Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Greg was referencing his niece with an insulin pump. That's because she's type 1. She's always going to need insulin. Type 2 diabetics can also make use of insulin. Typically, we'll look at your stuff like your metformins, like your SGLT2 inhibitors first. Those are a little cheaper, a little easier. And at the end of the day, it is easier to take a pill than have a pump on or have to do injectable insulin. Very, very case dependent, depending on what is going on and what all needs to be addressed at that particular point in time. Because another thing I would look at is if I have a new patient that I'm managing for diabetes, what are their other comorbidities? Are they relatively healthy, so to speak? No really other issues? Or is this person a diabetic? Do they also have kidney disease, peripheral vascular disease, or heart disease, like coronary artery disease? Or do they have all three of those with diabetes? And those are the ones that you're looking at trying some of these other modalities, trying some of these other treatment regimens that not only can help with the overall blood glucose control, but can actually sometimes mitigate the negative factors of the other diseases as well.
Got it. So when I Googled, so I remember when I first started dealing with about 10 or 15 years ago, never heard of anything about a GLP-1 and the types of medication that were being given. There was like several different medications given for diabetes. It's not necessarily the case now. So I noticed when I Googled this time, the first thing that came up was GLP-1 medications. Can you kind of share with a little bit about what they are and how they work?
So your GLP-1s or GLP-1 agonists are your stuff like Ozempic is probably the most famous one at this point, well known. Don't do good with an endocrinologist, but I'll do what I can. So it mimics a natural hormone in our body that kind of addresses three separate key issues that can all lead to diabetes. So if you address them, hopefully it can all help them. So one of the first one is it mimics a hormone in the pancreas that can actually release the insulin when it's needed. And that can help the overall control over the long term, kind of like we look at our long-acting insulins. It also, and forgive me, the dumbed down version is it releases a hormone that triggers some of the receptors in our brain that makes us, or in our stomach and our brain, that makes us feel full, feel satiated longer. So a lot of the people, you know, one of the bigger things that you see with Ozempic is you see weight loss. And a lot of times you'll see some relatively aggressive weight loss. And it's not done in a vacuum. It's not like they're taking a shot and it's burning off the fat. What it's doing is it's activating hormone receptors that are already there artificially, which absolutely can be helpful. And the last thing it does is it slows the gastric motility that basically allows the food to stay in your digestive system longer, which will also kind of, pseudo give you a fuller feeling for longer. So really the best things that, from what I can tell, I'm by far not a GLP-1 expert by any means, but from all the research that I've done and from everything that I've been instructed by physicians and been educated on, is it attacks those three separate things, all of which can help with the overall prognosis of diabetes. So it seems to be working out relatively well.
Now, I want to issue, I want to say a warning, but an awareness notification now. So one of the things we often see in the insurance industry is that everything happens through the PCP, right? One of the things we want to encourage from what we've seen in the last 15 years is that you want to have a great PCP that's communicating with you well, ordering the initial tests and exams and so on and so forth. But you have to couple that with a specialist, like an endocrinologist, right? So make sure that as you go through these various conditions we've talked about last week was high blood pressure. This week is diabetes from a low level, and then we'll talk about heart and chronic pain and some things in the future. But make sure that you don't get stuck at the PCP. The PCP is very, very important. The internal medicine is very, very important. But they would tell you themselves, correct me if I'm wrong, that's more of a generalist, right?
Internal medicine, generalist, all those are kind of general terms for the same thing. It's basically, a lot about a whole lot. But whenever you start to see a disease process start to progress, whether it's heart, lungs, kidneys, it's kind of like, oh, I got a guy for that. Let's go see him.
Right. And that's what I want to emphasize to people. You must do that. You must do that. 'Cause I see so many times in some of the urban areas, they only go to the PCP. They never venture out to get that expert. It's like, for example, when I think of bodybuilding and think of symmetry, I think of flex. All right.
Yeah.
So you think of that, who do you want to go to? I may have a general person at the gym, which Greg has let us know is probably not the best trainers to go sign up at to see. But he's an expert on symmetry, and man, I say symmetry and I say adversity because he's had a tremendous amount of that in his life. So just make sure you're going to see the specialist when it comes to these type of things. I know Greg wanted to ask you something about the Inflex as well, about the play of the testosterone and the impact it could have on our overall well-being, and does it directly, indirectly? I'll let Greg and Flex talk about that. They're much more.
First up, I want to counter one thing that Will has said so far, that we'd be doing better with an endocrinologist. I think we're doing absolutely fabulous with you on board. So I'm related to too many physicians. I know how they think, and they think that they speak.
They're gonna give you 2 minutes.
They're a little bit. They think they're one step below deities. So, and they speak over everyone's head. You're making everything very clear, very concise, and understandable at the same time. So I think we hit a home run with you versus getting an endocrinologist on. So I will just put that out there.
Don't stop. Get Greg off here, man.
I agree.
But yeah,
before Greg carries on, one thing I wanted to say about that: don't wait around in your PCP. The biggest thing that I would advocate for people nowadays is how information is now open up to everyone. Do your research, 100%. There's a couple places: the American Diabetic Association, the CDC has a National Diabetes Prevention Program. Like, those are some programs that you don't have to wait around for your PCP to do this. Start pulling those strings early. Like, if the first sign that you think something may be going on, do your research. Any solid PCP is going to hear you out when you say, "Hey, this is what I'm looking at," and there's no downside to it. So sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to piggyback on what you were saying, like what you're saying about the PCPs. They're good at what they do, but we got these other specialty groups for a reason. Do your research. Get out there, and if you're in the gym every day attacking the weights, go attack your disease the same way.
Greg, before we start on the testosterone, I just want to kind of ask a question for you, LaQuentin, and for you, Mr. Patton. So, LaQuentin, you were saying that a lot of people stop at their PCP, and that's so. Is that more so the person not being their own advocate, or is that something that the PCP should be recommending that they go to? Because a lot of people, I mean,
That's a loaded
like,
question.
you know, in my beginnings of having health problems, I looked at the doctor as knowing it all. And why do I need to ask anything? I'm here. You're a specialist. You're going to tell me what I need. And what I've learned is you have to be your own advocate in a lot of these situations. You have to stand up and buck back and ask questions. So that question for the both of you guys.
Well, I say from the my perspective, and I'm gonna give a political answer as best as possible. There's I'm gonna give you two acronyms that you need to be very familiar with. One is called an HMO, one is called a PPO. Okay. I'm not gonna go into the details of how I'm gonna tell you the basics of it. And this is a PPO. On a PPO, you're not required to see your PCP in order to go to a specialist. So that means if you have a situation going on that you think is, if you're already a diabetic or no, you want to go straight to a specialist, you can go to the specialist without getting a referral. An HMO, unless it's called a POS, which means it has an open network, you can go see anybody within that network. An HMO requires you to go see the PCP before, and he has to refer you to a specialist. Now, we're going to assume that everybody has the best intention, and they're only going to refer you to the highest, most competent specialist. But it's a stopgap.
I mean, to me, so I wouldn't sell that, but continue.
The thing is, and Andre and I did a podcast on this a while back, is we have, and I'm going to put this in the, I'll add it sometime this week. It teaches you how to be an advocate for yourself. Okay. So number one, a lot of times, Flex, that's strictly because they're going through the PCP, and the PCP, they may not be clearly communicating. It's a two-way street. You got to know what to ask and what to communicate. And just like you said, Greg, that's one of the biggest problems in the minority communities. They go there and they don't ask the question. They just, whatever the doctor says, Well, the doctor, you notice how many, I like Perry Mason, a lawyer. A lawyer has all these books, right? And they go research and they're looking. They don't claim to know everything, but they only can be as good as the information you provide. So if you're not telling them how you feel, what your experiences are, did you take your medication? And this is the big one. If you have medication, this is probably with any physician, correct me if I'm wrong, William, any physician would tell you the number one issue is patients do not take their medication as prescribed, but they give them feedback as though they are. So you think about that. You're supposed to take one pill every day. And the doctor really is, he's taking an educated guess on what's going to work for you. Is that correct, William?
All right. Absolutely correct.
So you tell him you're not getting better with that one pill that's 10 milligrams, right? So he's going to do what? Increase the dosage, increase the number of pills, but you're not telling him that you're not taking the pills.
And you got to be careful too, because you got to dig in sometimes. Like that's like if I put somebody on a medication or something, or if a primary care puts them on a medication, they come back and their hemoglobin A1C has almost doubled. You're looking at them like, how's the medication going? You taking it? You sure? And they might very well be, but
and not to mention the fact that they would go to the PCP, and they'll go to the specialist, and then there's no information exchange.
Yeah.
So he didn't tell him. One of the first things you should tell your PCP is that I went to see the endocrinologist, and the endocrinologist prescribed me these medications, because that's a part of his decision-making process. If you're going to see him and you're diabetic and you're not telling him that I was prescribed medication beforehand by my endocrinologist, he's operating in the blind. So the bottom line very quickly is the fact that you have HMOs and PPOs. HMO, you have to go see the PCP first, and the PCP, based upon the information you provide, will make a decision to send you to an endocrinologist or whatever the specialist is. If you don't share that information accurately, then he doesn't necessarily deem to do that. A PPO, you can go wherever you want to go that accepts your your form of insurance, whether it be Medicare or commercial or another form of insurance.
All right,
Well, I want to
great.
jump in there real quick and say one thing that, in my personal opinion, the life's blood of the medical community is nurses. So speaking to them, and I mean, just throw out there, William, and you're a nurse practitioner, and I don't think people understand that that's how that relates to, let's say, a registered nurse. So maybe if you could say the difference, because you've gone through an extra level of licensing and education to be a nurse practitioner, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, if you could tell the difference there, I mean, you could prescribe medication, I believe.
Yes. So the biggest difference there is nurse practitioners. It's either a master's or a doctorate program. Of course, I don't have time to do the doctorate, so I got the master's. But that's all. So that is what is required to sit for your national certification boards to become a nurse practitioner, which is what you would classify as an independent provider. So, you have your physicians. They're going to be the gold standard. The nurse practitioners work collaboratively with the physicians on patient care. The biggest difference that we have, like a lot of times they're related to akin to PAs, physician's assistants. The biggest difference we have is we develop our own healthcare plans. If I go in and see 30 patients, like I just got done rounding a little bit ago, I saw off the chart actually. If I saw 32 patients today, those are my patients. I'm looking up all the labs myself, checking all the medications, making medication regimen changes as needed. The biggest delineating factor is our supervising physician is always going to be available for consult. And like Dr. Hardy is my supervising physician, along with Dr. Waters, she's awesome. And what they do is, if you have a good rapport with your physician, if you've proven that even if I don't know the answer, I will go find the answer. I think that is the hallmark of a good provider, is like LaQuentin was referencing. They're not going to pretend to know, but they're going to go do the due diligence and go find out. That's going to be your hallmark is what's going to make a stellar provider. So nurse practitioner, we develop our own programs. We prescribe our own medications. A lot of these diabetic medications I've prescribed myself. I've had to do the research on them. Like a good example is your SGLT2s. They can help a lot with heart failure. So one of the first things that I'll do if I see someone come in that's especially a diabetic and a heart failure with reduced EF patient is put on SGLT2, as long as they don't have any problems or have any contraindications to it. And I'm just using that as an example. That's how I practice medicine. And at the end of the day, it's 100% what it sounds like. It's practice. There's going to be some things you get wrong. Another interesting thing, like I see a lot of patients come in on high doses of metformin that was good for them when they were out and about in the regular world. But let's say you just had a bad bout of pneumonia, or let's say you had a huge hip fracture or a femur fracture. Now you're laying in the bed, you're not near as active. That high dose metformin that was doing a great job at controlling your blood sugar, now it's too much. You're not eating as much because it's not your food. You're not getting out of bed as much because, the broken hip really kind of inhibits that sometimes.
Right.
And there's plenty of times that I have to start chopping into those medications, at least for the short term, to make sure it doesn't bottom your sugar out. So that's the biggest delineating factor. We definitely are still at the bedside. I work hand in hand with nurses every day, and I'm a little partial to them for sure. Like, world wouldn't run without them. I've worked with a whole lot of physicians, and I've nothing but good things to say about them. And I've worked with a whole lot of nurses in the same way.
Well, actually, now I'm changing the subject I wanted to go on to, because you mentioned something. Metformin is making its way into the fitness world very heavily, especially on the anti-aging TRT side of things in those clinics. But even on the black market, and Flex, if you've seen this, but there's.
I'm just kidding.
I'm saying what's the black market effect in sports? Give me a break. Can you go over what metformin is, how the mechanism behind it, what it's supposed to be used for? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you want to go into if you've heard anything about what some people are not recreationally but performance-wise using it for also.
I can't attest to metformin being used as part of like a PED, performance enhancing drug profile. I've heard of things in the past like fast-acting insulin being used, like if you're gonna have a big post-workout shake, trying to, just like we talked about, the role of insulin is to push sugar into the tissues. Where sugar goes, water goes. Where water goes, protein goes. So I've heard about those cases. I can't attest to the efficacy of that or anything like that. Obviously, there's no peer-based article that I know of that's going to address that. metformin, on the other hand, it's pretty tried and true. It's definitely one of the older ones, but it's stuck around for a reason. Mostly, it reduces the overall sugar production in the liver. That sometimes, if you already got high blood sugar for since you're a type 2 diabetic, you don't need any extra sugar production going on anywhere else. We're good. We got that. We just got to get it moving. So metformin can kind of bed that down a little bit. It's not glycolysis, I don't think. Don't ask me terms. I'm not going to be good with that. But long story short, it helps kind of bed down the endogenous sugar production in the liver, and can also improve insulin sensitivity over the long term. Because like we talked about, type 2 diabetes is insulin resistant diabetes. So if we can improve the insulin susceptibility or the insulin sensitivity, then that'll overall lead to starting to get on the road to fix that problem.
Flex, I saw you nodding your head. What have you heard around the diabetic medications, period, whether it be metformin or whether it be GLP-1, kind of what you're seeing and hearing in the
they've been how can I put this? They've been used in bodybuilding for quite some time. As William has stated, it just helps force water and protein and sugars into the muscle, which is a big thing that bodybuilders are into. I've heard of it, I've seen it. I can't really speak on it because I don't know it that well, but there's what's really interesting, that and even just blood doping, where you go into a high altitude area like, say, Colorado, and you do vigorous training, and then you withdraw your blood because it's so high in all these variants. And
What?
then and then when you get ready to do a performance, you inject that blood back into you. It's almost like turbocharging. So there's so many different ways. And very
ignorant out here. This is in bodybuilding. They do it. So help you understand. They are going to train at a high altitude, vigorously, withdraw their blood. First of all, what's happening at that high level because of that altitude that going to help you at a lower altitude, and you're injecting that blood back into you? I have never heard of such a thing.
That was a Greg LeMond, Lance Armstrong special right there. That's what they were.
Yeah. So I can't. I mean, maybe Greg or William can speak on it more educational, but on layman terms, if you ever been in high altitude, you can't do anything. Your cardiovascular is weak. You're gas out really fast. So people from those areas that live in those areas, whenever they come down to a normal or below altitude, it's like, they're like superhuman. So that's something that's done for
pretty sure Phil Heath did that.
Who's
He
that?
trained, I think he lived, I'm pretty sure Phil Heath lived in like Colorado, one of those areas, because I remember watching a ton of his videos, and he would mention how coming down to Vegas, the training and breathing would be easy down there. And long story short, and Greg would probably could attest to this maybe even a little more than I could, but training at a higher altitude basically forces your body to learn how to deal with low oxygen levels, and it increases your erythropoietin. It increases basically the oxygen utilization of your blood. So when you come down to a normal oxygen level, your body's basically like, what am I going to do with all this extra oxygen? And that slams.
Yeah, that's the theory. And then what they're really doing is they're injecting EPO.
Yeah.
EPO. Well, first of all, whatever it does, it's not helping the Denver Broncos that much. So
well, you still got to have skill.
Yeah, you still got to have skill. You still definitely got to have skill. But Greg, if you want to move on to the testosterone portion.
Well, I just want to get his takes. I know we spoke about it earlier, that I've been reading some journals on this to prepare for today. But I know just recently in the Journal of Cardiovascular Transitional Research, they did a meta-study. Larigo did a meta-study over 5-6 years of TRT and its effects on these things. And I mean, he came to the conclusion that it reduces mortality rates with men with type 2 diabetes. So I don't know if that could be the next step into going into things, because he took, is this a chicken or egg approach? Did they develop type 2 diabetes? Because we can't really call it adult onset anymore, because we're getting kids in their teens or preteens that are getting diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, but he found it reduced mortality rates over a 5-year span that he saw. Cholesterol, glucose levels were lower. So I don't know if that's something that may be one of the next evolutions of treatment for it.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it makes sense. If I were to see someone that was on TRT and had a drop in fasting blood glucose, cholesterol, my thought process would be probably they gained more muscle and probably lost some fat, if I had to guess. And this might be a gross oversimplification. Obviously, I'm nowhere near the researcher level for a reason. I don't have time to do research.
You don't have so much time.
Yeah, that's my knee-jerk reaction. Like, of course, if like we talked, circle back around, what was one of the number one predictors of diabetes was metabolic syndrome. Theoretically, TRT could help address some of the issues that lead to metabolic syndrome, therefore solving that in diabetes. And I could definitely see how that would lower mortality in relation to the diabetes. Without going into the risks associated with HRT and everything else, I could definitely see how he was able to correlate, hey, HRT was able to positively impact these parts.
Right. I mean, just to clarify, not say already, you not say causation or anything along those lines, just correlation of.
Absolutely.
What are some of the biggest myths about diabetics that you wish people would stop believing?
Oh, good question. Probably that it's their fault. I definitely think that, sure, people sometimes make some decisions that can lead to worsening disease processes, whether it be hyperlipidemia, whether it be diabetes. But like I was mentioning earlier, I don't like the fact that it has such a negative connotation on it, in the sense of, hey, you did something wrong, you didn't take care of yourself, now you're diabetic. That's way too cut and dry. There's so many more things that can predispose someone. You and me and Greg could be all sitting in the same room doing the exact same thing, and I might develop diabetes. Greg might, you might, just because of your heritage, because of genetics, because of family history, because of how we ate 10 years ago. So I think if maybe we were able to kind of dispel that negative kind of connotation to it, and I think they're getting better. I do think it's getting better. But I think if we just put that away, like, it doesn't matter what happened. And if a patient comes to me, no matter what's going on, it doesn't matter what happened. Whether or not you did something you shouldn't have, whether or not it's your fault, their fault, your folks' fault for the bad genes, none of that matters. All that matters is, hey, this is what we got going on. Let's fix it.
Well, if you can jump that. Oh, sorry.
So do you feel that a lot of your patients actually are carrying a weight of embarrassment, or because, like, in my ignorance, right, my lack of knowledge, what I see a biggest myth is just you're just a couch potato and you just been eating garbage all your life. Where now I fully understand it can be just a genetic predisposition, or just from your family tree. Maybe it didn't hit that lineage, but it hit the next. So do you see a lot of the patients come in feeling kind of depressed, or feeling like it's something that they did?
Not in direct relation to the diabetes, but I do see on rare occasions. There's been a couple times that I might have somebody come in and they went through the hospital, went through all the work, and they planned on doing a diabetic workup, but one thing led to another, nothing happened. They come to me, I kind of complete that cycle, and they have a hemoglobin A1C of 7.2, which would, now you're diabetic. And then I come to them and tell them, and for me, like I said, I'm trying to remove the stigma, so it really isn't a life-changing conversation for me. And then I see somebody get really upset about it, and that one kind of surprised me. It takes a lot to surprise me. And I kind of explained to him, I was like, hey, this isn't a death sentence. This is just something that happens. Here's what I think we need to do. Here's what we can do to keep it under control. It was kind of a wake-up call for me, actually. I don't think I necessarily ever gave it that much thought, really, because it was so prevalent in our patient population. Probably easily 6 to 7 out of 10 I see will either be pre-diabetic or diabetic, or have some kind of diabetic management ongoing. Just because it's very, very easy to develop that whenever there's chronic illness involved as well. And remember, my patient population are going to be some of the sickest, coming straight out of the hospital, coming right to me. So that's why I would see a disproportionately large amount on some kind of diabetic regimen. But I never really got the chance to see that except a handful of times. But when I did, I saw how it affected me, and I saw, there was probably some embarrassment there. There was certainly shock, and shock derived from what was clearly a negative connotation to be labeled a diabetic. And that's what was that's kind of what had me thinking and really kind of keyed me into, okay, well, yeah, I never really thought about that, but you're right. Somebody might feel bad about this. To me, it's just another problem to treat.
Greg and I were doing some research the other day. Believe it or not, guys, we do research our topics
Clearly, yeah.
along with our life experiences. And my question is around to whatever is considered to be normal. Is it possible for someone that's a diabetic to live what we call a normal life? Because as he and I were going through the process, it said that, depending on his type 1 to type 2, I mean, you can be cutting in 10 to 13 years off of your life. On the type 1, I think it said it was 4 to 10, 4 to 13 years, can cause a difference in lifespan. So we just say on average between the two of them, let's just say you're going to live at least 5 to 7 years shorter lifespan than if you were not a diabetic. So is it possible, or are there things going on in your body that says if you're a diabetic, these things are not going to function well over a period of time and your life is going to be shorter because they're going to wear out?
Go back to what diabetes is. It's a problem with elevated blood glucose. If we can fix that, it'll fix most of the issues. The challenge comes getting it diagnosed early, getting it under control, keeping it under control. The mortality factor when it comes to diabetes, as far as like how it impacts overall mortality, I would have to actually look into the studies to see, hey, what was the cause of death on each individual thing?
Yeah,
because for all
comorbidity.
Yeah, like a chronic morbidity increasing. Because the thing is you definitely will see a correlation between the two, but like Greg was mentioning earlier, that doesn't necessarily mean a causality relationship between the two.
Got it. Understand.
No, people can absolutely live normal lives. Just keep blood sugar under control. And obviously that's a very ground level grunt way to respond to it, but hey man, keep blood sugar under control. And that's what I was saying, the biggest advocate you can be for yourself is if you're a diabetic, you attack that just the way you attack any other problem, just the way that we did in the service, the way that we do in the healthcare field. You learn that thing inside and out. You learn how it works, what makes it work, what makes it not work. You learn everything you can about it, and then you start picking apart anything anybody says on how to fix this. If you can pick it apart, clearly that's not the best way to do it. So learn it.
I had a question for Greg and for Flex, particularly Flex, because we gonna start an early celebration for them. We have a man that this is his birthday month. We'll send you his cash out. You guys want to share. Flex 60. He turned 60 years old. Flex 60. And Flex, as you look at going into 60, and one of the things that you and Greg have continued to tell me is that you can, I won't say over-exercise, but it doesn't take a tremendous amount of exercise to really get things. I'll say in control. Now, quite naturally, if you've done like I have and gained more weight than you should have over the last 10 years of your life, it's going to take some excessive work to get your body back down. But have you given any thought? I know you have, to the types of exercises and some of the things that people can do to kind of manage their overall health that will in turn help with the high blood pressure, help with the diabetes. If there was say there was 3 exercises you had to give and 3 foods areas that you would concentrate on, what would it be for someone that's maturing into their 60s?
Well, my answer to that would be very different than a healthy person, because I have so many different health problems that I'm dealing with, and I take a very old medication that's called warfarin, which enables me to eat certain foods because of the vitamin K in that. So But as far as exercise, I'm going to steal a saying that a good friend of mine, Stan Efferding, says. Just get up and do a brisk 10-minute walk after each time that you eat. Helps digest those foods, because a lot of that starts with just the ability to be able to digest those foods. And again, my the other three exercises, I have a um a distorted vision on what exercising is, because I come from such a high volume, extraordinary high intensity of training. So anything I do now, I almost cringe on, because it's like nothing. So I'm very imbalanced on that, and what I'm learning to do is the ability to tone back and saying, getting in there and just getting moving. So I don't I don't work out anymore, and that's one thing I've had to tell myself. You don't work out anymore, you exercise. That's a big difference. Working out is going in my ignorance, going in there, getting it in, leaving everything on the floor and walking out,
Interesting.
just destroyed. Exercising is anything. Exercising could be me going in my backyard and going swimming in the pool, which is one of the number one exercises that you can do for the body. So I'm still learning into my 60s, because I come from, I guess you can say, such a high, pyramid of a mountain that I was on. So, it's embarrassing, a lot of the things that I do now, but I constantly have to tell myself, you're not that guy anymore. Mentally, you might feel it and you might see it, but you're not that guy anymore. As far as eating, that's another thing that I'm actually diving into now, because I have a problem with digesting food. Sometimes it just sits in my stomach. Other times I have diarrhea. So diving into, is some of the foods that I ate when I was younger and competing, I'm having a lower tolerance to those now. So that's a question that's going to have to be answered after I do a few more tests.
Got it. Got it. And what are your thoughts, Greg?
I mean, everything you said was pretty straight on. I mean, I know there's recommendations as far as what physicians dealing in this genre, or William, what he might recommend, but I'm going to venture to guess, I'm probably going to get some anger for this one, but the type 1 diabetic, that's a different situation. You should basically be living a regular life anyway. But type 2, I'm going to guess a good percentage of them are not very active. They might be working a job that's at a desk 8 to 10 hours a day, and they might be commuting I'm in the Bay Area of California, so they might be commuting 45 minutes to an hour to and from work. So we're talking 10 to 12 hours a day. They get home and they're tired. They're going to go sit with their family and eat and go to bed. So the activity levels aren't very high. So like Flex says, just going out and getting a game of pickleball, which I think is completely stupid, but it's still activity.
Hey, we don't all agree with that. I'm just kidding.
That hurts my knee just thinking about it.
Or, like Flex said, going and swimming in the pool, doing some basketball in the pool or playing some basketball. Those are perfectly fine. I know if I'm going to get into my world of things, there are plenty of studies out there that shows that there are longevity correlations with muscular strength. So in those cases, with just coordination and balance and everything else, I would recommend Hugh, you and I talked about this the other day, 20 to 30 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week of squatting, deadlifting, and standing presses. There you go, William, military presses. Will get the job done. You don't need to go have, what Flex used to go through during his competing days, or what he's going to make me do in a couple of months when I get ready for my next show. That's not real. That's something that 95% of us out there don't need to deal with.
Well, I tell you guys, I'm fortunate. I'm 56. I don't have any physical ailments I'm aware of. Mentally, I might be slightly tilted to the left. I don't know. But I tell you guys, all of you guys out there that are in your late 40s, 50s, and going into your 60s, one of the things that Flex has done for me and Greg has done for me is helping me understand that my foundation is everything, and that's my legs. I mean, my first workout with him was my legs, and if I don't get anything in a week, I'm going to get my legs. I may miss something else, but I'm not going to get my legs. And check it out. Sometimes that means I can't, last week I worked 3 16-hour days, but you know what I did? I literally was in my office doing bodyweight squats. Bodyweight squats, and then you take and you come down to the point to where you lean up against the wall and just holding that position up against the wall where your legs are parallel to the floor. Them legs will start. Them legs will start
So
jumping.
start shaking.
Just start shaking. And when I first started back, man, I was doing push-ups off my knees. I would hit the first 20. The second, I'm like, it's a difference. But just from a male perspective and what it's done for me, whatever you can do with your legs, it makes a huge difference in everything else. It just really makes a big difference.
William, with your type 2 patients, do you recommend, is activity part of their programming?
Always. I tell every little old lady that I'm working on with a femur fracture, get up, come on, let's go. No, I always, that's for any patient, no matter what it is. Always physical activity will save your life, quite literally. I tell folks, and any surgeon will tell you that too. After any surgery, getting out of bed post-op day one is the roughest surgery that is the roughest pain you'll ever get, but it will quite literally save your life. I'm about to say Flex can probably attest that more than I will, but they'll tell you, get moving.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, we want to bring this to an end. We're a little bit over the hour. William, I want to thank you so much for taking this time, for sharing your expertise with us. Like Greg said, I think you've done a bang up job. I couldn't have asked for a better guest in this. And again, just listening to you and what you've done with your training and then going to school on top of that, that just shows a whole different type of human. And your whole thing is to serve and help other people. That's just amazing, brother, especially for me who's dependent on people like you to be able to live a healthier lifestyle. So I'm deeply thankful to be able to have you on the show.
No, thank y'all more than that for having me. I really appreciate it. Honored to meet y'all, Flex, especially you. I mean, like I said, I've been following you longer than you will ever have known me. I know, LaQuentin. No, hey, you go compete against Dorian and Ronnie, and then you can be over there. That's all about it.
Oh, I have no desire. I call those are gladiators. I'm not a gladiator.
I know. There was a time that I wanted to be a bodybuilder, but I was like, well, strong man, I can eat when I want and be strong. So I think that might be my more wheelhouse.
Good choice.
We're going to circle back around to you. We really would like to learn a lot more about your experiences, as well as some of the things you're doing to help stay healthy as you've dealt with the challenges of the breakdown of your body and the mental health side of your profession and what you've chosen to do in life. So I thank you. God bless you. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. It's great meeting you.
All right, everyone, have a blessed week.
Yes, sir. You too.